Good morning. Good morning and welcome to Be an Explorer, another beautiful day from my backyard here in Pierce, South Dakota. My name is Ann Lewis and this is Giving Tuesday for the South Dakota Discovery Center. Those of you who follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, you will see that we put out a video um, that talks about how and why we are live streaming. So we're super excited about that. We hope you'll give it a watch and feel good about being part of something that is really important to our community, our state, and even beyond. We're reaching people all over the country and even throughout the world. So you're part of something really big when you're part of Giving Tuesday. And check out the hashtag Advocate for Science if you can't find it. We're super excited about what we've accomplished over the last 2 months and what we are going to be accomplishing this summer. So more about that in a future segment. I want to bring on Dr. Amanda Bachmann, who will be talking about spiders in just a minute. But since this is Be an Explorer Tuesday, I'm going to start out, as I always do, with welcoming everybody. Good morning. I'll go back inside in a little bit to check the other camera so I can see your comments and to welcome you. We have Sarah, who is saying good morning and helping me with the instructions and keeping me on track as she always does. If you can, hop up, run to a window, run to the front door, and let's do an outside check. What's going on in your space in terms of temperature, in terms of cloud cover, in terms of wind? We always start out that way because we are explorers and we look around our world and we get to know it really well, even if it's just our backyards. Our backyards are really important places. That's where we live. That's where lots of little animals and critters, as we've been exploring over the last few months, live, including jumping spiders, which Dr. Bachmann will talk about in a bit. So what do we have here in my backyard? Well, I have some cumulus clouds. The sun's in front of a big cumulus cloud is in front of the sun right now. So that is keeping me from getting blinded by the sun. Despite my jacket, it is a little bit higher than chilly, headed towards nice. I have my thermometer. And according to my Celsius thermometer, it is almost, where's my camera? 20 degrees Celsius. Let's try to get, so that 20 is nice. 10 is chilly, 20 is nice. So I'm going to just unzip my jacket. I don't know why I thought it was colder. In terms of wind, I do see some leaves moving just a little bit. Now that there are leaves on the trees, you can see that happening a little better. So remember, 0 is when nothing's moving. 1 is when just the leaves and the leaves are moving, the leaves in the grass. 2, the twigs. 3, small branches. 4, large branches. 5, the whole tree. So I'm calling today a Beaufort scale of 1. Beautiful, beautiful day. And so we'll see what happens. I've noticed as I've been paying more attention that we usually start out with a Beaufort scale of 0, 1, and then by afternoon we're up to 3s and 4s and sometimes even 5s. That's what happens when you live in the middle of the country in South Dakota. So I'd like to bring on Dr. Amanda Bachmann. She joined us last week. Good morning, Dr. Bachmann. How are you?
Good. Good morning, Anne. I was looking out my front window at the leaves moving on my maple tree too.
Okay, well, there you go. See, you are an explorer as well. We brought you on to talk about spiders, but before we get to spiders, there's been some real big bug news this week, and that is the Asian hornet, which we're seeing headlines about the murder hornet. Um,
Yeah.
Tell us more about that.
So I do have a slide on it, and so I'll be able to sort of show you folks all like the picture and what we actually do have. But yeah, real quick, the Asian giant hornet really hit the news over this past weekend. It was discovered in Blaine, Washington, in the beginning of December. And so it was confirmed from a dead specimen. So it was not a live hornet that was found in the United States, but there was a couple live nests that were found in Canada and subsequently destroyed. So this wasp is native to a large range of Asia. And if you pay attention to introduced species and species that sort of come here and kind of explode, or even in some cases naturalize and we like having them, a lot of times they did originate in parts of Asia. And one thing that people don't realize is that a lot of our climates and kind of some of our temperate growing zones, we have some very big similarities to some regions of China and that part of the world. And so species that come over from there come to the United States and it's like, oh, hey, like I can live here. And we've also imported a lot of our ornamental trees and shrubs and landscaping plants from that part of the world. And so when those, especially, insects or even in some cases like plant diseases end up in the US, they've got their host plants already readily available. So there's been a lot of like terror and fear in the headlines about the Asian giant hornet. And while yes, it is a large insect, it is nowhere near South Dakota. It is not going to get here in 2020. Hopefully, it will actually never get here. It needs trees as sort of a big part of where it likes to hang out, and we don't have a lot of those in a lot of South Dakota. It's also why people really don't like it is that it will take out honeybee hives. So these wasps and hornets, a lot of these insects use protein sources to feed to their young. So these Asian giant hornets will actually get together and raid a honeybee hive, and they will kill the adult bees and take their body parts back to feed to their young. So it's kind of like a war of the social bees and wasps. Unfortunately for European honeybees, they're not really good at defending themselves from this hornet because the European honeybee did not evolve together with the Asian giant hornet.
So, wow, I could probably talk our time about this, but I do want to get to spiders. And we'll talk about the general ick factor that people have towards a lot of insects, including the hornets, including the spiders. But tell us more about spiders. Let's just turn you loose and talk about spiders for a little bit.
So yeah, spiders are arthropods. So like the insects, that we talked about last week, we're all in the phylum Arthropoda. So things that are crunchy on the outside, gooey on the inside, and they have segmented appendages. So in the case of spiders, they are arachnids. So they're hanging out with your ticks, your mites, and your spiders are all together. So these critters all have 8 legs and they've got 2 body segments. So they've got the head, much, in insects we've talked about also have heads. But instead of having a thorax and an abdomen, the arachnids have what we call a cephalothorax. No, so the head is the cephalothorax, head and thorax mushed together, and then the abdomen. So they've got 2 body segments and they've got 8 legs. They do not have antenna, so that's another difference with insects. So if you're looking at something, and there are insects that will mimic spiders, and there are also spiders that will mimic insects. So sometimes it's important to be able to, check the segments and count your number of legs. But yeah, spiders are predaceous. Some of them will hunt down the things that they eat. Others will build a web so that they can catch the things that they eat, which is actually pretty cool. Spiders, full disclosure, I did not always like spiders. I used to freak out and call my dad and make him kill them. And then I went to grad school and I lived with a roommate who was much more cool with spiders than I was. And we had an agreement that if the spider was in her room, it got to live. If it escaped her room, I could do whatever I wanted with it. As I got into, more of extension and teaching people about insects, I came to realize that, hey, spiders are people too. And if I'm cool with insects, I really should get cool with spiders. So I started learning more about spiders. And that's one of the things, with anything that you're afraid of, the more that you learn about it, sort of the more you can, manage or even get rid of that fear. So I've really come a long way with spiders. I let them live in my house. Sorry, anybody that comes to visit or stays over. I will catch and release the ones that should belong outside. I'll put them back outdoors. I do have 3 cats. So this is Mabel. Mabel will eat spiders. So I do try to get them before she does, but no promises. And, I let the spiders hang out that are in my yard and garden because they do, great things outside. And Mabel is like, oh, cool, you're wearing headphones. Let me just play with those.
So, do you have any pictures to show us different kinds of
Yes.
spiders we might find around? Or
So yeah, but, excuse me, if anyone needs to, check cats again off of your Zoom bingo, we've got you covered. Okay, so we'll come back to the Asian giant hornets. I will skip ahead here. Can you see this picture, Anne?
I can, yes.
Okay, so this is one of our wolf spiders, and this spider is in the state that I usually get them when I'm in my office taking samples for extension. They usually come to me dead because people tend to shoot first and ask questions later when it comes to spiders. So I see a lot of dead spiders, which makes me sad. Wolf spiders are, some of our largest spiders in South Dakota. They can have a pretty big wingspan of their legs, which also freaks people out. I Wolf spiders though want to be outside. They're not an indoor spider on purpose. A lot of things find their way indoors by accident and can't find their way back out. So for something that big, I really recommend catching it and releasing it back where it wants to be, which is outdoors. Also, wolf spiders are pretty cool because the females will take care of their young. We often think that parental care is only a thing that mammals do, but spiders and wolf spiders will do it as well. So you're always running a risk if you attempt to squish a mama wolf spider because she carries her babies on her abdomen. So you can kill the big spider, and then suddenly you have like 50 baby spiders that have just dispersed into your house. So I really think of that as motivation to let these critters live. And also, some spiders are just really, really adorable. This is one of the jumping spiders. It was in a planter of mine a couple years ago, and I got this picture of it. But jumping spiders are the cute little compact fuzzy ones. They're pretty solitary. They don't build webs. They kind of hop around and they will sort of hang out in the same areas. So I actually have one on my back door right now that's been there for about a week. And if left to its own devices, which I will, it'll probably hang out there all summer. Like I should probably name it at this point. It's going to be a pet. They can actually, like when you look at them, they'll sort of tilt their little heads at you. It's very adorable.
Yeah. I'm seeing some really big eyes. And I thought I read somewhere spiders have multiple eyes. So tell us about
Yes.
spider eyes.
So yeah, and insects as well, more than 2 eyes. But spiders, in this case, this jumping spider, you can kind of see on the image, it's got 4 eyes lined up in the front. I believe spiders can have up to 8 eyes. So sometimes those eyes will also be on the top of the head and maybe not as big. But sort of the arrangement of spider eyes is one way that people who study arachnids can tell some of the different genuses apart.
What else do you have there? I'm seeing lots of cool pictures in the
Yeah.
get the rock
um,
stars out.
So this is a spider that was just hanging out on my siding and had, uses a web to catch its prey and had actually caught a bee. So the shadow really shows what's going on here. The small bee got entangled in the web. It's being wrapped up in silk and paralyzed, and the spider is going to consume it. So, circle of life, everybody. And
So,
then
oh, go ahead.
Oh, and this is an image just to show that. So a lot of people are really scared of spiders, and definitely, don't want to handle insects, and they definitely don't want to handle spiders. Um, Spiders are totally like they see you as something that is dangerous. Most of the time, spiders are going to want to run away from you. Humans are not a food source for spiders, so they're not going to seek us out to bite us like mosquitoes do, because mosquitoes want our blood. This is another example of a jumping spider. I was actually doing a master gardener training course in spearfish, and we were out in the park, sleep netting for different insects, and somebody caught this spider, and I was able to, handle it and let it crawl around my hand, and it was actually really cool. So, spiders are, I think a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, it's a spider bite, but really spiders are not out to get us.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about for a moment about the poisonous spiders, because there is one poisonous spider in South Dakota.
So the spider that we are, the spider of human medical importance in South Dakota is the black widow, which I don't have a picture of, oddly enough, because I haven't run into one. Actually, I ran into one in person in the Badlands, but I couldn't get a very good picture of it because she was building her web. So she was like moving at a surprising amount of speed. So black widows, we do have them, especially more in western South Dakota. So sort of, do be on the lookout for them. But again, they're not a spider that is going to seek a person out to bite them. How spiders get in trouble is when they're hanging out in like boots or gloves or a dark corner, and you reach your hand in or put your foot in and you start to crush that spider. And that's when the spider is going to react to defend itself and bite you. Spider bites, confirmed spider bites, are very, very rare. A lot of times folks will see like a random skin irritation and not know how it happened and be like, oh, it was a spider bite. It was not a spider bite.
Yeah, unless you actually saw the spider bite you probably can't say that it's really a spider bite. It could have been any sort of insect or anything,
Yeah.
irritation, some sort of little cut that got infected.
Yeah. Or like a mosquito bite that went wonky. Like there are sort of way less. I think spider bites, like they sound impressive and dangerous. And so people would be like, yeah, I survived a spider bite. No, dude, you didn't.
So we have the the Black Widow. And speaking of the Badlands, I once was in the Badlands, and I was in Sage Creek, and you've been there too. And so they have these like outhouses, these vault outhouses. And I went at night, and I had my headlamp because there's no electricity. And I looked up, and there was a Black Widow. And there was another spider there, and another camper said to me, "Can you believe it? A Black Widow and a brown recluse together." And she was like kind of freaking out. And I was like, "I don't think so." But can you address this brown recluse thing?
Yeah, so I did actually, for whatever reason, when I went back to my office to pick up mail and a couple books, I grabbed a lot of books about bees and, perennial, my native plants and that kind of stuff. But I also grabbed this book. So this, there's a book about brown recluses written by Dr. Richard Vedder, who is one of the sort of premier experts on brown recluses in the United States. I have read this book, like no joke, cover to cover, read it. We in South Dakota are not in the native range for brown recluse spiders. We have gotten sort of the occasional report of a suspected brown recluse, but unfortunately, those reports have not come with bodies so that we can identify the spider. Brown recluses actually don't super like to hang out outside, so they're not going to be like building a web in the corner of an outhouse. That's just not their behavior. Brown recluses have gotten a bad name because sometimes their bites can turn necrotic. So, what that means is that the tissue can degrade from the venom in their bite. Of confirmed brown recluse bites, only 10% have become necrotic. So, even of brown recluse bites, not very many of those end up being, really sort of like terrible medically. So my fun little brown recluse cover photo, you can see it is a tan spider, and it's got what we call this characteristic violin on the cephalothorax. has kind of a pale abdomen, but honestly, that can vary depending on if the spider has fed recently. Brown recluse spider legs are not banded and they don't have long hairs on them. So that's one of the ways that we can really easily rule out if something is a brown recluse or not. Really, you just look at the legs. There are a couple really awesome spider scientists that are very active on Twitter that if you tweet them a picture of your suspected spider, they will identify it for you and tell you whether or not it is a brown recluse. So that's a kind of handy service that they provide. But yeah, we don't have sort of a confirmed endemic or, that lives in South Dakota population of brown recluses. And I think somehow we maybe lost Anne and Cleo's meowing. So,
I'm
yay.
I'm still here.
Okay.
So I know we're getting short on time because you have another thing you need to go to. One last thing though, getting back to the Asian hornets, I know but sometimes when you're dealing with things like bees and hornets, people are really afraid of them. And I'm seeing a picture of the cicada killer. Help
Yes.
us to identify an Asian hornet and then help us have a strategy. So if we think we find one, what should we do?
Okay. So, um, Asian hornets are a large insect. So they're going to be about 2 inches, which is pretty big. We do have cicada killers, which you can see the image there of the critter that's sitting on the rock. That is a cicada killer. We do have those. Sometimes they can be close to 2 inches, but not usually quite that big. So size here kind of really helps. The Asian giant hornet has a very characteristic yellow head. As you can see, our cicada killer, the head is that same sort of reddish brown color. So size is a big one. And we also have, our paper wasps, our European wasps, our yellow jackets. We have a lot of flying hymenopterans or, wasps and bees that live in South Dakota. But size really is, one of the big characteristics. Also, if people can just really understand that this was a very small number that have been confirmed in a very sort of small geographic region in the United States. You know, if on the out chance that somehow we end up with a giant hornet in South Dakota, it is going to be because somebody brought it here, usually by accident. I mean, that's how insects sort of get transported across the country. If we think about how emerald ash borer, moved with, firewood and travel, sort of across the country. Um, but yeah, people are scared of bees and wasps because they sting. These insects sting as a defense mechanism. So if they're feeling threatened or their nest is feeling threatened, that's when they are going to, maybe what you would consider react poorly. So, kind of the best thing to do with these insects flying around is stay calm and move away from them slowly if you don't want to be near them. Flailing, moving your hands around, trying to swat them, that's how you're going to get in trouble. So stay calm, take a deep breath, back away. Things like yellow jackets are also looking for protein sources. So if you're eating outside and getting bugged, by yellow jackets and other wasps, consider having like some kind of like a decoy food trap for them. Um, you know, Figure out sort of what they're coming to and put some of that like far away from you. And that can help to sort of redirect those insects. Because a lot of times the social wasps that we have, when they're in your yard, you might not know where they're nesting. So you're not going to be able to necessarily manage their source. But yeah, like a lot of people, maybe have the horror story of the yellow jacket and the soda can. My recommendation for that is, don't drink out of soda cans. Put your beverage into a closed container with a straw or something that, is too small for an insect to get into. So a lot of our interactions with insects in the natural world, the outside is their space too. And we need to just, be observant, learn about their behavior, and sometimes just change your behavior and your actions so that you can coexist, because these are an important part of our ecosystem too. And cicada killers, while they're big and scary, they're really not a threat to humans. They only care about eating cicadas.
Yeah. So unless we actually have a giant hornet body, don't go around saying you saw a giant hornet. You have to have the body and send
Yes.
it to Dr. Bachmann for verification, because you just might have
Yeah,
those
it's like
large cicadas.
you have to have a body, and honestly, I'm not going to be the one to identify it for South Dakota. If I, got one, much like, Dr. Ball and Emerald Ash Borer, we have to send those things to USDA APHIS, and have people who are, essentially like government taxonomists, confirm that identification for us. So like, if you give me a giant wasp, even if it is an Asian giant hornet, I'll be like, yep, this is interesting. I am going to, get some confirmation on the identification.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you. This was very interesting, and I feel better about the giant hornets. I wasn't that concerned, but if you're not worried, I'm not worried. So thank you for joining us. Have a great day to all of our explorers out there. Oops. We have a question. Why do black widows have a red dot?
So yeah, the female black widows, one of their identifying characters is that red hourglass on the underside of their abdomen. And, you know, that's not something that I have really an answer for as to why. A lot of different insects and spiders have some interesting different, color patterns. And a lot of that can sometimes come down to sort of evolutionary chance. Also, things that have that sort of high contrast coloration can serve as a warning. So we didn't talk about aposematic coloration, but if you think about your bees and your wasps and even the black widow spiders having that red black or orange black or yellow black, those are things that aren't trying to blend in to their environment, which means that they probably have a defense mechanism if you're a predator and you're going to eat them. So bees very clearly telegraph like, hey, I don't look like this flower. If you try to eat me, I'm going to sting you. And that's a thing that predators kind of learn about. And so that's why we also have things like syrphid flies that will mimic bees. They're totally harmless, but they use that same coloration to make predators think that they're going to hurt them.
Awesome. Dr. Bachmann does have another meeting she needs to go to. If there are other questions, just leave them in the chat and we'll get her to circle back around and answer them later. So
Yep.
thank you to everybody who joined us today. Stay safe, stay curious, and go explore.
Thanks.